If you are a man over 60, I want you to listen very closely to what I'm about to tell you. In my work studying relationship psychology and lifestyle design, I have analyzed the lives of hundreds of mature men from different backgrounds, different professions, and different walks of life. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the biggest threat to your health, your wealth, and your remaining years is not the changing economy. It isn't the aging process, and it isn't being alone. The greatest threat is often far closer than most men realize. It is the toxic people you continue allowing into your inner circle simply because you share history, loyalty, obligation, or the same last name. When a man reaches this stage of life, the time for pretending is over. You have spent decades working, providing, protecting, solving problems, and carrying responsibilities that many people never fully appreciated. You have earned wisdom through experience, and perhaps more importantly, you have learned that time is not an unlimited resource. Every year matters. Every peaceful day matters. Every relationship matters. Yet many senior men continue tolerating people who quietly drain their energy, disrupt their peace, and create stress that serves no purpose. The most dangerous people in your life rarely arrive as obvious enemies. They do not announce themselves. They do not wear warning labels. Some arrive disguised as family. Some arrive disguised as friendship. Some arrive disguised as love, loyalty, or duty. They may even be people you have known for decades. But beneath the surface, they are slowly dismantling your peace of mind, your emotional stability, and in some cases, even your physical health. Tonight, we are uncovering the 5 kinds of people senior men must absolutely avoid, even when walking away feels uncomfortable, even when guilt tries to pull you back, and even when others do not understand your decision. Because past a certain age, your peace becomes far more valuable than anyone's approval. Stay with me until the very end, because the 5th type of person is the one most senior men struggle to cut out of their lives. Yet they may be the single greatest threat to a peaceful and fulfilling future. The first kind of person a mature man must immediately distance himself from is the perennial crisis manipulator. In my experience, manipulation rarely arrives loudly. It rarely announces itself with obvious hostility or bad intentions. Instead, it arrives disguised as urgency. It arrives wrapped in emotional chaos, constant emergencies, and a never-ending series of problems that somehow always require your involvement. This person has mastered the art of turning their instability into your responsibility. For many senior men, this individual is often an adult child, a relative, an old friend, or even a romantic partner. No matter who they are, the pattern remains the same. Every phone call feels urgent. Every conversation revolves around a problem. Every request carries the weight of a life or death situation. There is always a bill that needs paying, a relationship crisis that needs fixing, a bad decision that needs rescuing, or an emergency that supposedly cannot wait another day. The details may change, but the pattern never does. What makes this dynamic so dangerous is that it targets something deeply rooted in many older men. You were raised to endure hardship quietly. You were taught to protect, provide, and carry burdens without complaint. The crisis manipulator knows this, whether consciously or unconsciously. They understand that your instinct is to step in and help. And over time, they train you to react instead of choose. Pay attention to what happens when you finally hesitate. Notice how quickly guilt appears. Suddenly, you are made to feel selfish for wanting peace. You are made to feel uncaring for setting a boundary. The conversation shifts from their behavior to your supposed lack of support. But here's the truth. Genuine love does not require you to sacrifice your emotional stability every week. Helping someone through a difficult season is one thing. Becoming their permanent emergency response system is something entirely different. At this stage of life, you must learn the difference. A mature man does not have to explain every boundary he sets. Sometimes the most powerful word in the English language is simply no. When you stop reacting to every crisis and start protecting your own balance, you reclaim something many senior men lose without realizing it: control over your own life. The second type of person who can quietly poison the final chapters of a man's life is the self-absorbed narcissist. Unlike the crisis manipulator, this person may not constantly ask for money, favors, or emergency assistance. In fact, on the surface, they may appear successful, charming, and even enjoyable to be around. Their damage is much more subtle, which is exactly what makes it so dangerous. I want you to think about the people currently in your life. When you sit down with them for coffee, speak with them on the phone, or spend time together at family gatherings, what happens when the conversation turns toward you? What happens when you share a health concern, a personal achievement, a meaningful memory, or something that genuinely matters to you? For many senior men, the answer is revealing. Within moments, the conversation is redirected. Somehow it always circles back to their problems, their stories, their accomplishments, their opinions, and their experiences. You become a listener in your own relationship. Your life becomes background noise while they remain the star of every discussion. Many older men tolerate this behavior for years because they dismiss it as personality. They tell themselves that's just how they are. But the psychological impact is much deeper than most people realize. When you spend enough time around someone who consistently overlooks your thoughts, feelings, and experiences, something begins to happen internally. You slowly stop sharing. You stop expressing yourself. You begin shrinking inside relationships that are supposed to support you. One of the saddest realizations many mature men have is discovering that they have not been asked a genuinely caring question in months. They have spent years listening, helping, encouraging, and supporting others while receiving very little curiosity or concern in return. At this stage of life, your emotional energy is too valuable to spend acting as an audience for someone else's endless performance. You do not need to argue with a narcissist. You do not need to change them. You simply need to recognize the pattern and stop expecting something they are unwilling or unable to give. Shorten the conversations. Protect your attention. And remember this: healthy relationships make you feel seen. If someone consistently makes you feel invisible, that is information you should not ignore. The third person every senior man must learn to recognize is the disguised critic. This individual is often far more dangerous than the loud, openly negative person because their criticism arrives wearing a mask. They rarely attack you directly. They rarely raise their voice. In fact, they often present themselves as caring, concerned, or simply trying to help. Their words are carefully packaged as advice, guidance, family concern, or constructive feedback. But beneath the surface, the effect is always the same. No matter what you do, it never seems to be enough. They have opinions about how you spend your retirement. They have suggestions about your finances. They question your decisions, your routines, your hobbies, your friendships, and sometimes even the way you choose to enjoy the life you spent decades building. Every achievement comes with a warning. Every decision comes with a criticism. Every personal choice is met with a subtle reminder that they would have done it differently. What makes this behavior so damaging is that it works slowly. A manipulator creates pressure. A narcissist creates invisibility. but a disguised critic creates self-doubt. Their words often sound harmless in the moment. A small remark here, a passive comment there, a little joke disguised as concern. Yet those comments have a strange way of lingering long after the conversation ends. You find yourself replaying them late at night, wondering if perhaps they are right, wondering if maybe you should second guess your own judgment. That is the true danger. Advice without respect is often just criticism wearing a disguise. You have spent a lifetime gaining experience, overcoming obstacles, raising families, building careers, surviving hardships, and learning lessons that cannot be taught in books. Yet, the disguised critic somehow manages to make you question wisdom that was earned through decades of living. If this message is bringing you clarity and reinforcing your boundaries, take a brief moment to subscribe and join our community of wise men who refuse to let the world dictate their peace. At this stage of life, you must stop giving every opinion equal value. Not every voice deserves access to your inner world. You do not need to defend your choices. You do not need to explain your lifestyle. A simple nod and a quiet continuation of your path is often the strongest response possible. The moment you stop feeding the critic your explanations, their power begins to disappear. The fourth person a senior man must absolutely avoid is the irresponsible chaos creator. These individuals move through life leaving a trail of unfinished responsibilities, broken promises, damaged relationships, and self-created disasters behind them. No matter how many opportunities they receive, the outcome is usually the same. They create problems, avoid accountability, and eventually expect someone else to clean up the mess. Unfortunately, older men often become the preferred target. Why? Because many people assume that a man in his 60s or 70s has unlimited patience, endless wisdom, extra time, and financial resources sitting quietly in reserve. Instead of seeing you as a person who has earned the right to enjoy peace, they begin seeing you as a safety net. Whenever their life falls apart, they assume you will be there to catch them. I remember hearing about a 70-year-old man named Arthur. A relative asked if he could stay with him temporarily while getting back on his feet. That single word, temporarily, has trapped countless senior men. What was supposed to last a few weeks slowly turned into months. The relatives stopped contributing, stopped helping, and stopped respecting boundaries. Dirty dishes piled up. Utility bills increased. The house became louder, messier, and more stressful. Arthur's peaceful routine disappeared. His mornings no longer felt calm. His home no longer felt like his own. This is how chaos creators operate. Their problems quietly become your problems. Helping someone through a genuine crisis is an act of compassion. But enabling a pattern of irresponsibility is something entirely different. One creates growth, the other creates dependence. What many people fail to realize is that stress carries a real physical cost. High blood pressure, poor sleep, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion are often connected to the environments we live in. At this stage of life, your peace is not a luxury. It is part of your health. If someone consistently brings disorder, drama, and instability into your world, you are not being cruel by creating boundaries. You are protecting the years you worked so hard to earn. And sometimes, the healthiest thing a man can do is stop rescuing people who have no intention of rescuing themselves. This brings us to the fifth and final type of person every senior man must avoid at all costs: the chronically ungrateful drain. Of all the people we've discussed today, this may be the most difficult one to recognize because their behavior often hides behind familiarity. They may be family, they may be close friends, They may be people you have spent years helping, supporting, and sacrificing for. But no matter how much you give, one thing never changes. It is never enough. At first, the sign seems small. You offer your time, and it is treated as expected. You provide help, and it is barely acknowledged. You make sacrifices, and instead of appreciation, you receive complaints about what you didn't do. Over time, a painful pattern begins to emerge. Your kindness stops being viewed as generosity and starts being treated like an obligation. This is where many senior men become trapped. Because you have always been dependable, people begin assuming you always will be. Because you have always stepped up, they stop appreciating the fact that you did. Your willingness to help becomes the baseline expectation rather than a gift. And the more this happens, the more invisible you begin to feel. What makes chronic ingratitude so damaging is that it slowly changes the way you experience your own generosity. A kind man naturally enjoys helping others. It gives him purpose. It gives him satisfaction. But when every act of kindness is met with entitlement, something begins to harden inside. Gratitude is not just about manners. Gratitude is about recognition. It is the simple acknowledgement that your effort, your sacrifice, and your presence matter. Without appreciation, even the most generous heart eventually becomes exhausted. At this stage of life, your energy is one of your most valuable assets. Stop investing it into people who treat your kindness like a commodity. Invest it where respect, gratitude, and care flow in both directions. Life becomes noticeably lighter the moment you stop trying to fill a bucket that has no bottom. When people are young, they often believe that the purpose of life is to accumulate more. More money, more achievements, more possessions, more recognition, more status. They spend decades climbing ladders, chasing goals, and proving themselves to the world. There is nothing wrong with ambition. In fact, many of the men listening to this video built their lives through discipline, sacrifice, and hard work. But something interesting happens as a man grows older. The definition of wealth begins to change. By the time you reach your 60s and beyond, you start realizing that some things are worth far more than money. A quiet morning becomes valuable. A stress-free afternoon becomes valuable. A peaceful home becomes valuable. The ability to enjoy your day without unnecessary drama becomes valuable. You begin to understand that true wealth is not measured by what sits in your bank account. It is measured by the quality of your daily life. And that is why the people around you matter so much. The crisis manipulator steals your stability. The self-absorbed narcissist makes you feel invisible. The disguised critic slowly chips away at your confidence. The chaos creator disrupts the peace you worked decades to build. And the chronically ungrateful person drains the joy out of your generosity. Each one takes something valuable from you, often without you realizing it until years have passed. Walking away from toxic people is not an act of hatred. It is an act of self-respect. It is not about becoming cold, bitter, or selfish. It is about understanding that compassion does not require unlimited access. You can love people while still protecting yourself from the damage they cause. You can care about someone without allowing them to control your peace. You can wish them well while choosing a healthier distance. If someone in your life consistently leaves you feeling anxious, exhausted, frustrated, or emotionally depleted, stop ignoring what your mind and body have been trying to tell you. At this stage of life, your peace is not a luxury. It is a medical necessity. If nobody has told you lately, let me remind you of something important. You are still allowed to choose yourself. You are still allowed to set boundaries. You are still allowed to protect your time, your energy, and your remaining years. If you watched all the way to the end, tell me in the comments which of these 5 people have you encountered in your own life. And if there is another type of person senior men should avoid, share your wisdom below. Your experience may help someone else. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Stay grounded, stay observant, protect your peace, and I'll see you in the next.